Nurse Ratched. Nurse Mildred Ratched represents the most chilling kind of power, the power of procedure over compassion. As the head nurse of a psychiatric ward, she enforces order with clinical precision. Her evil is quiet, bureaucratic, and systematic. Once an army nurse, she carries the discipline of the military into the hospital. Every group therapy session becomes a public tribunal, where patients' fears are exposed and used as leverage. Her tools are subtle intimidation and psychological manipulation. She shames patients into obedience, sedates those who resist, and ultimately destroys individuality in the name of treatment. Her office is sterile, her voice calm, yet her control is absolute. The terror she inspires comes not from violence, but from her unwavering belief that she is helping people by crushing their chaos into conformity. The film's director, Miloš Forman, altered the meaning of Ratched's character from the one in Ken Kesey's novel. In the book, she is part of a vast oppressive system called the Combine, but the film turns her into a personal adversary for Randall McMurphy, played by Jack Nicholson. Without Chief Bromden's narration, the institutional critique narrows into a duel between individual rebellion and bureaucratic tyranny. The ward becomes a confined battlefield between freedom and order, climaxing when McMurphy's defiance shatters her illusion of total control. Ratched's calm composure masks a dangerous fragility. When defied, her authority crumbles into rage. Louise Fletcher's portrayal earned her an Academy Award and defined the character for generations. At 41 years old, after leaving acting for nearly a decade to raise her children, she returned to create a villain built on restraint. She isolated herself from cast members to preserve Ratched's emotional distance, channeling detachment into terrifying serenity. Paid just $10,000 for 11 weeks of work, Fletcher transformed vulnerability into dominance. Her stillness, her measured gaze, and her unshakable calm created one of cinema's most haunting portrayals of institutional evil. Amy Dunne. Amy Elliott Dunne is not just a villain, she is a manifesto written in blood and deceit. Her entire identity is built on performance, the product of a childhood where she was immortalized in her parents' best, selling children's books as Amazing Amy, a fictional version of herself who was smarter, prettier, and better than the real girl could ever be. Growing up in the shadow of her own idealized doppelganger, Amy learned to fabricate identities and manipulate perception. Her intelligence is surgical, her cruelty clinical. When her husband Nick betrays her, she stages her disappearance, fabricates a diary to frame him for murder, and transforms victimhood into vengeance. Amy weaponizes the public's obsession with the perfect wife gone missing narrative, knowing exactly how to turn media sympathy into a death sentence for her husband. Psychologically, Amy displays traits of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders, complete with pathological lying and an utter lack of remorse. Yet her actions are more than madness, they are commentary. Through her infamous cool girl monologue, she dissects the cultural expectation that women should mold themselves into fantasies for men, effortless, sexy, accommodating. The fury behind her revenge grows from years of performing this exhausting lie. Her villainy, therefore, doubles as social critique. When she returns home blood-soaked after murdering her ex-boyfriend Desi Collings, it is both a grotesque triumph and a theatrical reclamation of power. Rosamund Pike's portrayal transformed her from respected actress to cultural icon. Director David Fincher pushed her to embody both halves of Amy, the delicate ingenue and the calculating predator. Pike mastered an icy East Coast accent and transformed her body multiple times to reflect Amy's shifting facades, from the soft domestic ideal to the gaunt fugitive and finally to the sculpted avenger. Her stillness on camera is hypnotic, every smile calculated. Off-screen, she maintained that eerie composure, embodying a woman so intelligent and self-aware that her monstrosity feels disturbingly rational. Miranda Priestly. Miranda Priestly, editor-in-chief of Runway magazine, rules her world with icy precision, a woman for whom perfection is not a goal but a demand. Her villainy is not born of malice, but of expectation. She represents the price of excellence in an industry that rewards cruelty disguised as discipline. Her authority stems from her flawless taste and her intolerance for failure. Every sigh, every glance, every clipped, that's all, serves as both weapon and judgment. To her assistants, she is unbearable. To her peers, untouchable. Beneath her composure lies the exhaustion of a woman who has sacrificed everything, marriage, family, and emotional softness, to maintain her throne in a male-dominated empire. Her brief unmasking in the Paris hotel room, where she admits her husband is leaving her, reveals the cost of survival at the top, a rare fracture in the marble statue. The film softened Miranda compared to Lauren Weisberger's novel. In the book, she is a social climber who clawed her way from poverty under the name Miriam Princhek. In the movie, that history disappears, making her power seem innate rather than hard. 1. This alteration turns her from a desperate survivor into a tragic monarch, a woman who wears emotional frost as armor. The ending reinforces this reinterpretation. Her subtle nod of approval toward Andy Sachs transforms a tyrant into a reluctant mentor. Her villainy becomes a mirror, reflecting society's double standard that calls a man's authority strength but a woman's the devil. Meryl Streep built Miranda's dominance through restraint. She replaced shouting with whispers, forcing every room to lean in to hear her. Inspired by the serene elegance of model Carmen del Orifice and editor Liz Tilberis, she chose the white hair that became Miranda's signature. To preserve authenticity, Streep distanced herself from her co-stars, describing the loneliness as the price you pay for being boss. Earning an Academy Award nomination, she redefined cinematic power. Quiet, terrifying, and undeniably human. Cruella de Vil. Cruella de Vil stands as one of cinema's most enduring villainesses. Her evolution across 6 decades mirrors shifting cultural ideas about female ambition and rebellion. In the 1961 animated 101 Dalmatians, she is the embodiment of pure vanity. Voiced by Betty Lou Gerson, this Cruella is skeletal, chain-smoking, and unrepentantly obsessed with fashion made from Dalmatian fur. Her madness is exaggerated through design, green cigarette smoke, blood-red lining, and angular movements that make her appear more like a specter than a woman. She has no motive beyond greed and aesthetic obsession. Her evil is primal and unapologetic. The 1996 live-action remake reimagines her as a high-fashion mogul in the corporate world of haute couture. Glenn Close infuses the role with theatricality, turning Cruella into a parody of unchecked ego and artistic vanity. Dressed in extravagant designs by Anthony Powell, she commands every frame with exaggerated gestures and venomous delight. Close insisted the film retain lines like, "Chloroform them, drown them," to preserve the character's vicious core. Behind the glamour, the role was physically grueling. She endured hours covered in molasses for a scene and even had a 90-pound coat. Off-camera, Close negotiated to keep the entire costume collection in her contract, a real-life act of Cruella-level audacity. In 2021, Emma Stone's Cruella reinvented the character entirely. Now a punk rock anti-hero in 1970s London, Estella transforms into Cruella to avenge her mother's death and outshine her ruthless mentor, the Baroness. The fur obsession disappears, replaced by fashion as rebellion. Stone adopted a mid-Atlantic accent inspired by Tallulah Bankhead, creating a voice that blended theatrical elegance with anarchic confidence. This modern Cruella is no longer a caricature of greed but a symbol of creative defiance and revenge against the establishment. Across eras, Cruella evolves from madwoman to mirror, reflecting each generation's definition of female power. Agatha Trunchbull. Miss Agatha Trunchbull rules Cruncham Hall Primary School like a fortress, her authority built on fear and brute strength. Once an Olympic hammer thrower, she channels her athletic power into sadistic punishment. She despises children yet governs hundreds, convinced they are inherently wicked and must be broken into obedience. Her classroom discipline borders on medieval torture, locking students inside the chokey, a nail-lined closet, hurling a girl by her pigtails across the yard, and forcing Bruce Bogtrotter to eat an entire 18-inch chocolate cake before a jeering crowd. Her tyranny is both physical and psychological, every act a grotesque display of her dominance. Beneath her bluster hides deep insecurity. She is terrified of losing control and of the intelligent, defiant Matilda who refuses to fear her. The film adaptation by Danny DeVito expanded Trunchbull's villainy beyond Roald Dahl's novel. The setting shifted from England to California, adding a distinctly American absurdity to her brutality. The movie amplified the direct conflict between Matilda and Trunchbull, adding scenes where the girl sneaks into her home, narrowly escaping detection, and a terrifying sequence where Trunchbull traps her inside the chokey. These additions turned Trunchbull into a cinematic monster rather than a distant authority figure, the embodiment of every child's nightmare of injustice. Yet, her exaggerated evil also serves a moral function. By defeating her, Matilda symbolizes intelligence triumphing over oppression. Pam Ferris's transformation into Trunchbull remains legendary. Off-screen, she was gentle and kind, but in costume she became unrecognizable, broad-shouldered, scowling, and terrifying. She endured serious injuries during filming. Her finger split open while swinging the pigtail stunt, and her eyes were damaged by chalk dust in the classroom finale. Ferris's commitment made the role iconic. Her booming voice and physical authority captured both menace and tragic absurdity. Ironically, the children she terrified on screen adored her off-camera, often hugging her after each scene, proof that even the fiercest tyrant could not resist genuine kindness. Mary Johnston. Mary Johnston, from 2009's Precious, is one of cinema's most horrifying embodiments of generational trauma, a woman whose cruelty is so relentless that it becomes almost ritualistic. Her relationship with her daughter, Clarice Precious Jones, is defined by a cycle of physical assault, psychological degradation, and manipulation so complete that it reduces every interaction to an act of dominance. Mary's evil is not flamboyant. It is domestic and suffocating, unfolding within the claustrophobic walls of a Harlem apartment where every insult, slap, and withheld kindness carries the weight of decades of bitterness. What makes her terrifying is that she believes she is justified. She accuses her daughter of stealing her man, projecting her own self-hatred and jealousy onto the child she was meant to protect. Mary's behavior is the product of a broken system that shaped her before she ever inflicted pain on anyone else. Her life is marked by poverty, neglect, and the internalized misogyny of a world that discarded her long before she began discarding others. She embodies how abuse replicates itself, the victim who becomes the abuser. The film situates her within the broader context of 1980s Harlem, a community strained by welfare dependency, unemployment, and the twin crises of AIDS and addiction. These pressures do not excuse Mary's violence, but they reveal its roots in a social machinery that breeds desperation and madness. Monique's portrayal of Mary is devastating in its authenticity. Known primarily as a comedian before this role, she abandons every trace of charm and warmth to deliver a performance so raw that it feels almost documentary. In the film's climactic confession scene, her voice quivers between rage and grief as she recounts how her husband's abuse shattered her and warped her love for her daughter into hate. Monique later revealed that she drew on her own childhood trauma to play the role, a decision that explains the performance's haunting realism. Her portrayal does not ask for sympathy, only understanding, forcing audiences to confront the unbearable truth that monsters are often made, not born. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's on-screen persona in Mommie Dearest reveals the collapse of glamour into madness, the mask of Hollywood perfection cracking under unbearable pressure. Based on her daughter Christina's memoir, the film portrays Crawford as a star obsessed with control, her image immaculate, her private life monstrous. Every aspect of her home becomes a stage for discipline and humiliation. She beats her daughter with wire hangers for disobedience, chops off her hair for vanity, and forces her to keep only one of many birthday gifts to project moral restraint. Each act of cruelty springs from the same desperation, to preserve her fading fame and power. When MGM drops her contract, she attacks her rose garden with an axe, a violent metaphor for a career and identity destroyed. Crawford's need for control extends to her children. They are trophies in her campaign for public adoration, props in the illusion of the perfect mother. The film amplifies the horror beyond what the memoir described, turning domestic abuse into operatic spectacle. Christina Crawford later revealed that the infamous "no wire hangers, ever" scene and the garden rampage were inventions of Hollywood, not her own recollections. Yet these moments, exaggerated as they are, captured something emotionally true: the madness of celebrity culture that consumes its own devotees. The movie became infamous for its excess, oscillating between tragedy and camp. Instead of redeeming Crawford, it immortalized her as a symbol of parental tyranny and the cost of fame. Faye Dunaway's performance is the reason this portrayal endures. Immersed in method acting, she approached the role with total possession, refusing eye contact on set, screaming at the crew, and pushing herself to physical collapse during filming. She shredded her voice performing the wire hanger tirade and claimed later that she felt Crawford's spirit haunting her afterward. Her intensity blurred the line between actress and character. The result was a performance so volcanic it transcended realism. Dunaway became Crawford in all her grandeur, rage, and decay. Dolores Umbridge. Dolores Jane Umbridge represents the most terrifying kind of evil, the bureaucratic sadist who hides cruelty behind manners and pastel-pink. As Senior Undersecretary to the Minister of Magic, she wields law and paperwork as weapons. Appointed to Hogwarts as defense against the dark arts teacher, she brings government tyranny into the classroom. Her brand of control is suffocating. She replaces practical defense lessons with memorization, forbids dissent, and punishes creativity. Her infamous black quill forces students to write lines in their own blood, the words carving into their skin. Unlike Voldemort's grand evil, Umbridge's power lies in the everyday horror of obedience. She commits atrocities, while smiling sweetly, convinced that she is making things orderly. Her office, adorned with kitten plates and lace, becomes one of cinema's most unsettling spaces, a parody of domestic comfort masking systemic brutality. In the novel, Umbridge's punishment of Harry is secretive. He hides his bleeding hand from Ron and Hermione, a realistic reflection of how victims often conceal abuse. The film changes this dynamic, revealing his scars early and showing other students suffering as well. While this alteration removes some psychological nuance, it magnifies her tyranny, transforming Hogwarts into a totalitarian regime. The endless educational decrees pinned to the walls illustrate the suffocating spread of rules, each decree a nail sealing the coffin of freedom. Her downfall, dragged away by centaurs into the forbidden forest, is poetic justice, nature reclaiming what bureaucracy sought to sterilize. Imelda Staunton's portrayal of Umbridge is chilling in its precision. She approached the role without empathy, playing her as a smiling embodiment of ideological purity. Director David Yates advised her to imagine Umbridge's policies as ethnic cleansing in pink, grounding the performance in realism rather than fantasy. The juxtaposition of sweetness and violence made her unforgettable. Staunton later admitted that filming the detention scenes left her ill for days. Ironically, when the book was first released, a friend told her there was a role perfect for her, before realizing the description read, "a short, toad-like woman with a sickly smile." Perfect. Indeed, if you enjoyed this video about these iconic villains, you're going to love the one on your screen, so go check it out now.